I've learned a lot of things over my lifetime. I've read lots of books, as you can see from my background. I have 2 degrees. I've had multiple good business ideas. I've learned things from jobs over my 8-year career span. But if you ask me today, how much of everything that I have learned, read, gained from people do I remember? Maybe 0.5% of that information. The rest of it is gone. Well, not gone. The rest of it is stored in lots and lots of notebooks and jotters and journals that I've kept over the years. And that information is unavailable to me. If I want to remember something that I learned in college 10 years ago, there is no way for me to go back 10 years and get that information. It would involve me looking for all my notes from college, reading through each one of them, and hoping that I pick the right note that has the information I'm looking for. I'm sure you can relate to what I'm saying. How much better will your life be if you can remember some of the information that you have gotten many years ago? You may have received really great advice, or you got really good feedback from a job. Maybe you're trying to fill an application for a scholarship, or you're trying to apply for a job, and they ask you a question about something that you know you've learned about that thing before, but you just cannot remember what it was. We've all been there. And that is why when I came across this concept of the second brain, I was blown away. And it has completely changed my life and the way I handle information since I started applying it in 2020. In this video, I'm going to be introducing the second brain concept to you, and I'll be talking about 3 things. The first one is why one brain is not enough. Secondly, what is a second brain? And lastly, why is it important and why should you adopt this concept? So, why is one brain not enough? The brain is a very powerful organ. It processes and stores billions and billions of data every single day. But the problem is we consume lots of information every day. And most of the information that we consume is not relevant today. It's information that could be relevant 2 years from now, 2 weeks from now, 5 years from now, a long time in the future. Now, the brain does a good job of storing information, but for your brain to store information in a way that is easy for you to recall when you need it can be a very tricky task. The brain stores information in 2 formats: short-term memory and long-term memory. Short-term memory is basically information that you need right now in the short term. You are on a vacation and you check into an hotel and the receptionist tells you that you are in room 614. That information will be stored in your brain's short-term memory, just so that you can locate your room when you get to the appropriate floor. But 3 years after, 10 years after, if I ask you, what room did you stay in July 2024? You probably won't be able to recall that information because your brain accurately identified that room number as a short-term memory data point. And short-term memory is stored in the part of the brain that is called the prefrontal cortex. It's right in front of your brain, and that's where your short-term memory is located. When the brain receives information that is short-term memory, it looks at the information and it tags it as short-term. And once you've used that information for its purpose, your brain disposes that information. This is why you may go for a networking event, meet 30 people, they'll tell you their names, and the next day, you probably will not remember their names because your brain figured out that information is not long-term memory quality. Now, for information to make it to your long-term memory, what your brain does is that your brain takes that information from the short-term memory and associates that information to neurons in your brain. And long-term memory is stored in the part of the brain that is called the hippocampus. This hippocampus is what we call the deeper brain. For information to pass from the short-term memory to the long-term memory, your brain needs to attach neurons to it. You can think of neurons as basically strings attached to a memory. The stronger the neurons attached to a memory, the quicker it will be for you to recall the information. So back to the hotel example. Let's now say that this particular hotel, you went on the trip with your boyfriend, and this hotel was a very romantic hotel in Paris. It was overlooking the Eiffel Tower, and your boyfriend proposed to you in that room, right? And it was a grand proposal. The room was well decorated. There were balloons everywhere. There was jazz music. It was magical. And you stayed in that room for like a month with your boyfriend. Amazing. You have a higher chance of remembering the room number 10 years after. Why? Because there are so many things that are now associated with that room number. You went to your boyfriend. It was a romantic trip. It was in Paris. You got engaged. You stayed there for 1 month. So every day for 1 month, you kept remembering the number of that room. You are more likely to remember that number now because you have so many different neurons attached to it. The process of your brain converting information from short-term memory to long-term memory, as you can see now, takes a bit of effort, and not every information that your brain receives is worth the stress of being converted to long-term memory. Or it could even be worth the stress, but you don't have the time to, attach as many neurons to that information to make it long-term memory. So you're on TikTok right now and you come across sage advice for 10 red flags to look out for in a dating partner. In the moment when you're reading the advice, you are touched by it, it makes so much sense, you agree, great and wonderful. That is good information. And then you scroll past. And then you watch the video of a baby crying or a baby dancing. And then you scroll past and you watch, video of a travel destination. In 15 minutes, the wonderful information that you got about red flags for a partner is gone. Not because your brain is not doing its job, but because there are no neurons attached to that information. We are busy human beings. We don't have time to do the work of attaching as many neurons as possible to a piece of information so that we can recall it in the future. And this is where a second brain comes in perfectly. Many times, we as human beings try to store information in our brain and we fail over and over again. I'm sure you've probably had the business idea in the shower moment, right? You are in the shower, or you are doing something really random, you are cleaning, you are watching TV, and you have a light bulb moment. This would be a great business idea. And you tell yourself, I'll remember it. And you continue what you are doing. 10 minutes after, gone. Gone. Like when I think about it, it scares me. Imagine if, I read so many books, right? Imagine if I've read a book in 2019 that has all the answers to the problems I'm facing right now. But I read a book 2019 and the information, everything that I've read is lost. For me to get that information, I have to read the book again. A good example is this book, The Slight Edge. I read this book, I think it was in 2021, and it really made 2022 a great year for me. But I've forgotten most of the things that I've learned from this book. I remember the general gist, but I've forgotten some of the salient points. Now I'm in a place where I'm looking for answers for a specific problem, and I'm having to, read the book all over again to be able to get the same advice that I got, tip that I got in 2021. How many brilliant ideas have you had over years and you've lost? How many great insights have you gotten? Awesome advice have you received from people that you've lost and you've forgotten? This is why a second brain is important and you need one. So what is a second brain? Second brain is essentially a system for saving and systematically reminding us of the ideas, inspirations, insights, and connections we've gained through our experience. It expands our memory and our intellect using the modern tools of technology and networks. This is the definition of the second brain by Tiago Forte, who is the person who made this concept popular. There's a great book that he wrote about this concept that is titled Building a Second Brain. And I advise you to go and read that book for more in-depth details and examples about this system. A second brain basically is a system outside of your brain where you save and catalog information that you receive. And this could be videos, it could be links, it could be advice, it could be highlights from books, it could be anything. But it's basically a system that is outside of your brain that is easily encoded where you can retrieve information easily. So let's assume that I have the highlights from this book that I read in 2021 in this system. And I wanted to remember something, maybe about work. An ideal second brain will have the ability for me to go and search work, go and search something about that information, and it will bring up every single thing that I have saved in that system about work. Unlike my natural human brain, that I cannot just readily call up information if I want it. No. My natural brain needs something, a neuron, attached to that memory to be fired for it to remember. For the person to remember the room number of the room in Paris, they will need to remember that they got engaged there. They will need to remember that it was in Paris. And because they remember these other parts, these other neurons attached to the memory, it's easier for them to remember the room number. So the second brain is a more efficient, technologically driven system that allows you to just pull up information whenever you need it, wherever you need it, compared to your brain that requires a more complex, way of encoding information. Now, at this point, you may be thinking, but the brain works perfectly. The brain is the most advanced system ever created. There's no computer or ChatGPT or artificial intelligence that is as, complex or as advanced as the brain. That's fact. So why do we need a second brain? Well, that's a good question. Aside from all the other reasons I already gave, number one is it reduces stress on the brain. If you watch a lot of productivity content, you probably have heard how billionaires try to reduce the number of decisions they make every day. So you hear things like Steve Jobs wore the same outfit every day. Many people that eat the same breakfast every day, they take the same route to work, they wear the same thing. They just wear white shirt and they buy 50 different white shirts. That way, when they wake up in the morning and they want to pick out outfits, they just pick white. They eliminate that decision making. That's what a lot of minimalists do. Instead of buying 20 pairs of shoes and having to decide what pair of shoe you want to wear in that moment, they buy one or two essentials. And that's what they wear every single time. The same psychology applies here. The brain itself, even though it's a very powerful organ, tries to reduce the amount of decisions or processes that it makes. And that's why we as human beings form habits naturally. For example, when you are learning how to drive, you probably had to focus acutely on driving. You had to focus on turning left, on parking right. But when you drive for a number of years, after a while, driving becomes intuitive. You may be driving and having a conversation, driving and listening to music, listening to a podcast. You're not paying as much attention to, your steering wheel command or how you're parking. Why? Because your brain itself, after repeating the process, when you are learning over and over and over, your brain compartmentalized that process and it made it into a habit. So every time you are driving, your brain is free to do other things. So the brain itself is efficient. By offloading your thinking or your reasoning or recalling data to your second brain, you free up your brain to do the most important work that it does, which is process information. The brain is both a processing organ and a storage organ. But processing information is far more beneficial to us when your brain is free and your brain is not boggled down by trying to remember past information. Your brain can process information, it can create, it can imagine, it can forecast, and do other more complex tasks than try to remember, a random hotel room that you stayed in 15 years ago. Your brain will still store every information that you have ever received. But offloading the recall of that information to a second brain leaves your brain free to process information and focus on what is most important in that moment. I don't know if you've ever had that feeling where you wake up on a day, you see a date, and somewhere you know that this date is an important date, but you cannot remember why. That has happened to me a lot of times. I'll be like, oh, May 17. That day seems like an important day. What happened that day? It could have been the birthday of one of my friends from high school, but I can't recall it in that moment, and poof, you've missed someone's birthday. Having a second brain reduces the stress on your brain. Having a second brain also makes creation much easier. And a good example of this is myself. As someone who creates content on the internet, many times when I'm scrolling on TikTok or I'm on Instagram or I'm even just doing stuff all around, I have ideas for this would be a good video to make. Right? I read an article and it sparks inspiration in me. Having a second brain allows me to take that information and store it somewhere until it is time for me to create a video. And when it's time for me to create a video, I only need to go back to where I stored the information and I have the information ready for me, easy to create that video. But imagine if I read the article that time and I tried my best to keep the information in my brain. Now it's time for me to make a video and I sit down and I'm trying to remember the article, but I just cannot remember the article. Or I spend 2 hours trying to remember the article line by line, trying to remember the highlights from the article. This is a waste of time. I could have done the same thing, save the article, and when it's time to make my video, I have the information right there, right? And this applies for, students. You're in school, you're taking classes, you learn stuff. That's why we take notes in school, so that they remind us of, what we learned. I remember when I was in business school, as I told you, I have a second brain. When I was in business school, I learned a lot of things in business school, and I took notes of those things. Now I've graduated from business school now. If I need any information about anything that I learned, all I need to do is go to my second brain and basically search, and that information is immediately available to me. I don't have to rely on my brain to memorize the information. So if you're doing any form of creating, this could be maybe you're a content creator, you're a student, or you're just a person, and that thing, for example, that I store in my second brain is links to things I would like to buy for myself. I'm currently in the process of upgrading my wardrobe. And sometimes I'll be scrolling on Instagram and I'll get ads from Mango or Zara or something of like a nice top. but I'm not ready to buy it then. All I need to do is take that information and send it to my second brain. And when it's time for me to shop, to buy stuff, I don't need to start cracking my brain and remembering, oh, what type of dress was it? What type of bag was it? I simply need to go back to my second brain and I'll find it right there. The last benefit of having a second brain is that you have information readily available to you when and where you want to use it. The way that many of us stored information, especially in college, was journaling, writing it out in physical notebooks. That helped us at that time. But the problem with physical notebooks is that you don't carry it everywhere with you. So imagine that you have a journal where you've recorded important information and then you traveled and you left that journal at home. Now you are somewhere else. You are trying to remember that information, but it's not available to you. It is many miles away. That doesn't help anyone. Having a second brain that is powered by digital technology means that anywhere you are in the world, at any time of the day, you can go into your second brain and search for information, just like your brain. The way you carry your brain with you, or at least I hope you carry your brain, the way most people, I hope, carry their brains with them everywhere that they go, and they have information readily available to them, is the way a second brain operates. A second brain should be available to you anywhere in the world and at any time. I hope I've sold you on this second brain concept. I'm going to be making a video in the future about my own second brain and walking you through the ways that I created my own and the different use cases that I have for my second brain. If that's something that interests you, then definitely like this video and subscribe to the channel so you'll be notified when it comes out. Thank you for watching my video and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!